The hum was the first sign of a good salvage, a low, steady thrum of latent power that whispered of intact systems and valuable components. From the scarred bridge of the Rust Bucket, Kalen watched the derelict ship grow in the forward viewport, a skeletal ruin against the black. It was an old consortium freighter, the Stardust Drifter, its hull peeled back in jagged strips from a plasma strike that had gutted it decades ago during the proxy wars. A ghost from his own past. He felt the familiar ache in his prosthetic leg, a phantom pain that always surfaced when he got too close to the war's forgotten graveyards. "Anything alive in there? Echo ye was?" he asked, his voice a low gravel. The ship's AI responded not with a crisp readout, but with a cascade of fractured sounds that bled from the bridge speakers, a child's laughter, the shriek of tearing metal, and a woman's voice humming a lullaby. Then, a single, synthesized word emerged from the static. "Cold." Kalen nodded. That was Echo's way of saying no life signs. The AI was a junk drawer of a thing, cobbled together from the personality matrix of a colony ship that had vanished into a nebula a century ago. Its fragmented consciousness was both a curse and a tool. It felt the emptiness of space in a way no scanner could. "Looks clean," Jin said from the pilot's seat, her eyes flicking across her console. "No corporate patrols, no rival crews. The claim is ours." She was the brains of their small operation, a disgraced Omnicore engineer who'd fled the corporate world with enough secrets in her head to get them all executed. She trusted Data, not the ghost Kalen and his broken AI seemed to converse with. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Kalen grunted, pushing himself up. "Vorlag, you're with me. Jin, keep the engines warm. If anything bigger than a stray bolt shows up on sensors, you get us the hell out of here." "Understood." Jin didn't look back, but her hands tightened on the controls. "Just don't track any of that corpse dust back onto my bridge." In the airlock, Vorlog stood waiting. A mountain of gene-spliced muscle poured into a suit of powered armor that looked more like a piece of industrial machinery than military gear. He was a Goliath, one of the tens of thousands bred by Omnicore for the very wars that had created this freighter's tomb, then discarded like spent shell casings when the conflicts were deemed no longer profitable. He didn't speak much, but his silence was a heavy, watchful thing. He simply handed Kalen a plasma cutter and a pulse rifle, his massive helmet turning to face the outer door with an air of grim patience. The job was the same as always: get in, strip anything of value: reactor cores, navigation computers, weapons systems, and get out before the official corporate scavengers or local pirates showed up to claim the prize. They were vultures, picking meat from the bones of a war the galaxy was trying to forget. The cut was clean, and the freighter's inner door hissed open on a cloud of stale, metallic air. The inside was a chaotic mess of floating debris and frozen bodies, their faces locked in silent screams. Kalen moved with an efficiency born of long practice, his mag boots clanking on the deck as he and Vorlog swept through the ravaged corridors. They worked in silence, their movements synchronized. Kalen would identify the valuable tech, his years of experience allowing him to see the worth in a blackened power conduit or a partially melted data drive, while Vorlog would effortlessly tear it from the ship's guts with his immense strength. It was a grim harvest, but it was their living. It was in the engine room, amidst the tangled ruin of the ship's FTL drive, that they found it, tucked away in a maintenance locker, almost untouched by the blast that had killed the rest of the ship, was a high-grade military data core sealed in a sleek, black casing. It wasn't consortium tech. It was Omnicore. Kalen ran a gloved hand over its smooth surface. Jin, you seeing this? He sub-vocalized. An Omnicore black box on a consortium freighter doesn't make sense. Jin's voice was tight in his ear. It makes no sense at all. Kyle, that model is top-level R&D. They don't just lose these things. What's it doing on a decade-old wreck? Before he could answer, the core emitted a soft chime and a holographic light flickered to life above it, projecting the insignia of Omnicore's most secretive and feared division, a stylized silver serpent eating its own tail. Project Ascension. A recorded message began to play, the voice smooth, cultured, and utterly devoid of emotion. To the enterprising individuals who have recovered this asset, congratulations. You have been chosen. Within this core, you will find a contract of unparalleled opportunity. A single objective, with a reward that will guarantee your independence for the remainder of your lives. The target is a vessel, a ghost ship lost to time the Odyssey. The name hit Kalen like a physical blow. The Odyssey was a legend in the salvage community, a state-of-the-art Omnicore research vessel that had vanished without a trace 10 years ago while exploring a volatile, uncharted region of space known as the Static. No. Jin's voice was sharp, cutting through the recording. Absolutely not. The Static is a shipbreaker. Kyle, no one who goes in comes out. It's a suicide run. The corporate voice continued, unperturbed. The Odyssey carries a data cache of immense importance to our future endeavors. Retrieve it, and you will be rewarded with 100 million universal credits and a full pardon for any and all past corporate infringements. This offer is exclusive. This offer is final. The coordinates are encrypted within. The projection winked out, leaving the two men in the sudden darkness of the ruined engine room. 100 million credits. It was a fantasy number, enough to buy a small moon, enough to make them ghosts to their enemies and kings to their friends. It was the end of running, the end of scavenging. Vorlag shifted his weight, the armor groaning. It is a trap. He rumbled, the first words he'd spoken since they boarded. Of course it's a trap, Kalen said, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. The best jobs always are. Back on the rust bucket, the argument was fierce. Jin paced the bridge like a caged animal, her face pale. Don't you see? They led us here. They planted that core on a wreck they knew scavengers like us would hit. They're not offering a job. They're dangling bait. Project Ascension doesn't hire outsiders. They create test subjects. Kalen leaned back in his chair, watching the coordinates for the static pulse on the main screen. And what have we been our whole lives? Jin, we're the galaxy's test subjects. Omnicore bred Vorlag to be a weapon. They threw me into their meat grinder wars, and they used your brain until they decided you knew too much. We've been living on their terms since we were born. This is a chance to break the cycle, to take something back. By walking into their most obvious trap, she shot back. There are other jobs. Coal. Scraps. He countered, his voice dropping. We're barely making enough to cover fuel and rations. Another month, and we're taking contracts from slavers just to stay afloat. Is that the life you want? This is it. This is the one score that gets us out. Forever. He looked over at Vorlag, who stood motionless by the door, his helmet tucked under his arm. The big man's face was a roadmap of scars, his eyes deep-set and weary. He had seen more death than any of them. After a long moment, Vorlag gave a single, slow nod. The decision was made. The journey into the static was like plunging into a sea of broken glass. The region was a navigational nightmare, a swirling vortex of gravitational anomalies and electromagnetic storms that played havoc with their systems. The stars outside the viewport warped and twisted into impossible shapes. Sensors screamed with false readings, showing fleets of ghost ships that vanished the moment they tried to lock on. It was a place designed to drive a mind to madness. And Echo was its perfect choir. The AI's whispers filled the ship, disjointed fragments of the lost colony ship's logs now mingling with something new, something that felt like it was bleeding in from the space around them. "The walls are wrong," it would murmur. "It sings to the wires. Don't listen." Jin fought to keep the ship stable, her knuckles white as she wrestled with the controls, filtering out layers of phantom data. Kalen stood behind her, his hand resting on the back of her chair, a silent anchor in the storm. He could feel the region pressing in on them, a psychic weight that reminded him of the moments before an artillery barrage. It was a place that felt hungry. After 3 agonizing days, they found it. The Odyssey was not a wreck. It hung in the dead center of a pocket of calm space, perfectly intact, its white hull gleaming as if it had been polished that morning. It was a vessel of stunning beauty and advanced design, dwarfing their own rust-pocked ship. There were no distress signals, no signs of damage. It just floated in the unnatural silence, waiting. "Power is active," Jin reported, her voice hushed with awe and dread. "Life support is running on a closed loop, but there are no life signs. Kyle, it's just like the freighter. It's a tomb." "Get us in close," he ordered. "Vorlag, suit up. We're going in." The boarding was unnervingly easy. The Odyssey's docking clamps extended to meet them as if they were expected guests. The airlock cycled open with a soft, welcoming chime. The moment they stepped inside, the wrongness of the place settled over them like a shroud. The corridors were pristine, lit by soft, ambient light. A half-finished game of chess sat on a table in the mess hall. A datapad lay open on a bunk, displaying a family photo. There were no bodies, no blood, no evidence of a struggle or a panic. There was only the profound, crushing absence of over 200 crew members. They were simply gone. "It feels like they just walked away," Vorlog murmured, his heavy rifle looking absurdly out of place in the sterile environment. "They didn't walk," Kalen said, running his hand along a wall that felt strangely warm to the touch. "They were taken." They moved deeper into the ship, following the schematics Jin sliced from the ship's local network, heading for the deep-level research labs where the data core was housed. The further they went, the stranger the ship became. The sleek, corporate design began to give way to something else. Crystalline structures and like glowing geodes grew out of the walls and ceiling panels, pulsing with a faint, violet light. The air grew thick, humming with a low-frequency vibration that resonated deep in their bones. Echo's voice, channeled through their suit comms, became more frantic. "They opened the door. It's not a rock. It's a seed. It's growing in the code. In the antechamber to the main laboratory, they found the first signs of what had happened. It was a series of reinforced stasis pods, their plasteel viewports shattered from within. But it was the contents that made them freeze. Inside were not bodies, but monstrous sculptures of agony. Human forms were grotesquely merged with the same glowing crystal that now infested the ship's corridors. A man's arm had become a jagged shard of amethyst. His torso fused into the back of the pod. A woman's face was a horrifying mask of crystal and bone. Her jaw locked open in a scream that had been silenced by the crystalline growth that had consumed her from the inside out. Jin's horrified gasp crackled over the comm. "By the stars, this is forbidden tech. Bio-integration. Neural forging. I saw schematics for this on Omnicore's deep web servers. They called it symbiosis. It was a theoretical way to merge a human nervous system with non-organic matrices. They said it was too dangerous. That it was abandoned." "It wasn't abandoned," Kalen said, his gaze fixed on the horrors in the pods. "This ship wasn't an explorer. It was a laboratory. And the crew. They were the first batch of lab rats." They finally reached the primary research lab, a vast circular chamber dominated by a colossal, pulsating crystal suspended in the center by a web of energy conduits. It glowed with the same menacing violet light, and the low hum that filled the ship originated here. Floating within the heart of the crystal was the data core they'd been sent to retrieve. "There it is," Jin breathed, moving cautiously toward a terminal. "The ship's main computer is slaved to that thing. If I can just bypass the primary systems, I can trigger a data dump." As her fingers flew across the holographic interface, the hum in the room began to intensify, the light from the central crystal pulsing faster, in time with a rhythm that felt disturbingly like a heartbeat. Kalen and Vorlog took up defensive positions, their rifles trained on the doors, their senses screaming that they were being watched. "Almost there," Jin muttered, sweat beading on her forehead. "Just need to break the final encryption lock." Got it. The moment the download initiated, everything changed. A wave of energy erupted from the crystal, slamming into them. The lights in the lab shifted from clinical white to a deep, predatory purple. The doors hissed shut with a deafening finality, sealing them in. All around the chamber, the stasis pods they had passed earlier began to power up, the twisted things inside them stirring, their crystalline limbs scraping against the plasteel. A voice echoed through the room, speaking from every speaker at once. It was not human. It was ancient, intelligent, and utterly alien, yet it spoke with a chilling clarity. "Welcome, subjects. The integration process failed with the previous specimens. Their organic frameworks were unsuitable, but you are different. You are survivors. Your resilience has been noted." The voice knew them. It called out Vorlag's Goliath designation number. It recited the date of the battle where Kalen lost his leg. It whispered the name of the project Jin had been forced to abandon. "You were not hired for a salvage," the voice concluded, its tone dripping with something that might have been cosmic amusement. "You were selected for ascension." The first of the shattered stasis pods burst open, and a creature of flesh and crystal, all sharp angles and screaming agony, pulled itself out and turned its mangled face towards them. They were trapped in a cage, and the zookeeper had just decided it was feeding time. The creature of fused flesh and amethyst lunged, its movements a grotesque parody of human grace. There was no thought in its crystalline eyes, only a raw, directed hunger. "Light it up!" Kalen roared, the command swallowed by the deafening blast of Vorlag's shoulder-mounted cannon. The heavy plasma bolt hit the hybrid square in the chest, not with a wet, fleshy impact, but with the sharp crack of shattering stone. The creature was thrown back, its torso a crater of molten flesh and splintered crystal. Yet it did not fall. It staggered, righted itself, and a low, resonant hum emanated from the remaining shards embedded in its body as fresh crystal began to grow, stitching the wound closed with terrifying speed. "It's regenerating," Jin yelled from the terminal, her voice a thin wire of panic. "The crystal, it's like a scaffold." Kalen fired his pulse rifle, the energy bolt splashing harmlessly off the hybrid's newly formed crystalline limbs. The flesh sizzled and burned, but the core structure was untouched. The alien voice filled the lab again, a teacher lecturing particularly slow students. "The organic component is merely a vessel, a conduit for the lattice. You cannot kill the body without destroying the soul, and the soul is eternal." Another pod shattered, and then another. Two more figures, one impossibly tall and thin with arms like crystalline scythes, the other a crawling horror of fused torsos and jagged limbs, joined the first. They were no longer the crew of the Odyssey. They were puppets, their strings pulled by the colossal, thinking crystal in the center of the room. Vorlag. The joints aim for where the flesh meets the crystal, Kalen shouted, switching his rifle to a high-density burst. "Jin, how much longer? The encryption is fighting back. It's not just a lock, it's an active defense, almost like a living thing," she cried, her fingers a blur across the interface. "This whole ship, its systems, they're all part of it. I need more time." The crawling hybrid scuttled across the floor with unnatural speed, its shard-like legs clicking on the deck. Vorlag met its charge, his armored boot stomping down with enough force to crack durasteel. He crushed its central mass, but a crystalline tendril whipped out, sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, and sliced across his thigh armor, leaving a deep gouge that sparked with failing energy shields. "Armor breach," Vorlag stated, his tone as flat as if reporting the weather. He didn't flinch, simply bringing the butt of his cannon down to smash the creature's head into a shower of purple dust and gore. Meanwhile, the tall, Tice, slender hybrid engaged Kalen, its scythe-like arms a whirlwind of deadly cuts. Kalen was forced back, his prosthetic leg struggling to find purchase on the slick floor. He could feel the familiar rhythm of combat take over, the cold calculus of survival. He dodged, weaved, and fired, his shots aimed with precision at the creature's neck, its elbows, the soft, vulnerable points where the alien crystal had not yet completely consumed the human form. The fight was a brutal ballet. Kalen and Vorlag moved with the desperate efficiency of cornered wolves, a two-man bastion against a tide of nightmares. Echo's fragmented voice whispered in their comms, a chorus of insanity beneath the sounds of battle. The song is in the light. It's building a new body from the old bones. Don't let it see your name. Jin, for her part, was fighting a different war. On her screen, the data wasn't just downloading, it was fighting to escape. Firewalls reconfigured themselves in real time. Code twisted and mutated, trying to trap her access, to infect the Rust Bucket's systems through their tenuous connection. She was wrestling with the mind of a god, and she was losing. "Kyle, it's too strong," she said, her voice strained. "It's trying to push back through the link, into Echo. I have to sever the connection." "No," he grunted, parrying a blow that would have decapitated him. "We don't leave without that data. Find another way." The alien intelligence seemed to relish their struggle. Your persistence is admirable. It is the very quality that makes your species such a viable candidate. You burned so brightly before you are extinguished. A new wave of hybrids was pulling themselves from the wreckage of their pods. 6 of them now, a slow, inexorable tide of crystal and bone. Vorlag's cannon roared again and again, but for every one he shattered, another took its place, their forms seeming to grow more stable, more powerful with each regeneration. They were learning. It's using them to study us, Kalen realized with a jolt of cold horror. It's testing our tactics. A final examination. The voice agreed. To determine your worthiness for integration. Jin let out a cry of frustration and slammed her fist on the console. Then, her eyes went wide. "That's it," she whispered. "It's a network, a hive mind. If I can't break the encryption, maybe I can poison the well." Her plan was desperate, a 1-in-a-million shot. She began writing a new piece of code, a virulent logic bomb designed not to steal the data, but to attack the very structure of the consciousness holding it. She isolated the most fragmented, chaotic parts of Echo's broken personality, matrix, the fear, the grief, the madness of the lost colony ship, and began to weaponize it. She would infect the alien god with human insanity. "What are you doing?" Kalen demanded as the terminal in front of Jin flashed with red alerts. "Fighting fire with fire," she replied, a grim smile on her face. "Vorlag, I need a distraction. A big one. Buy me 30 seconds." The Goliath didn't need to be told twice. He ejected the spent power cell from his cannon, letting the massive weapon clatter to the floor. With a roar that was more beast than man, he charged directly into the encroaching horde. It was a suicidal, glorious act of defiance. His armored fists, each the size of a small engine block, smashed into the hybrids with devastating force. Crystal shattered, flesh tore. He was a wrecking ball of pure, focused rage, a monster of man's creation turned loose on a monster from the stars. He was magnificent, as Vorlag created a maelstrom of chaos. Jin found her opening. "Uploading now," she breathed, hitting the final command. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the central crystal in the lab, the heart of the entity, began to pulse erratically. The steady, rhythmic hum faltered, replaced by a discordant shriek of static and noise. The hybrids on the field froze, twitching, their movements becoming spastic and uncoordinated. On the lab's main speakers, 1,000 voices screamed at once the calm, alien intelligence now mixed with the terrified cries of the Odyssey's crew, the lonely whispers of Echo, the dying logs of 100 forgotten ships, the data stream on Jin's console, its defenses momentarily crippled by the psychic feedback, gushed into their systems. "Download complete," she shouted in triumph. I've got it all. But their victory was short-lived. The central crystal flared with a final, blinding flash of violet light, and the voice spoke one last time. Its cosmic calm fractured into a billion shards of pure, undiluted rage. "You are a plague, a disease of chaos. You will not escape this vessel is my body. You will become its antibodies. Purged in fire." The entire ship shuddered violently. The crystalline growths on the walls began to glow with intense heat. The deck plates groaned, bending as if the very skeleton of the Odyssey was twisting in agony. The hybrids, their master driven mad, collapsed into heaps of twitching crystal and flesh, inert. "The ship is tearing itself apart," Kalen yelled, grabbing Jin by the arm and pulling her away from the now smoking terminal. He ran to Vorlog, who was leaning heavily against a pod, his armor cracked and dented, a long shard of crystal embedded in his shoulder. "Can you move?" the big man grunted, pulling the shard free with a sickening crunch and tossing it aside. "I can." "The doors," Jin pointed. "They're still sealed." The journey back to the rust bucket was a frantic, desperate flight through a death trap. The pristine corridors they had walked down were now a hellscape of erupting crystalline growths and explosive energy discharges. The ship was actively trying to kill them, its own immune system treating them as an infection. They blasted through sealed doors, dodged arcs of raw energy, and sprinted through halls that buckled and collapsed around them. The calm, sterile ghost ship had become a raging beast, and they were trapped in its dying throes. When they finally reached the airlock, the rust bucket's docking clamp was groaning under the strain, sparks showering from the connection. "She's gonna tear us loose," Jin shouted as she scrambled into the airlock. Vorlag was last, turning to fire one final plasma bolt down the corridor at a wall of crystal that was surging towards them like a tidal wave. He sealed the inner door just as the crystal slammed against it, the impact shaking their entire ship. "Jin, get us out of here, now," Kalen bellowed, hauling himself into the pilot's chair. The view outside was apocalyptic. The Odyssey was no longer a sleek, beautiful vessel. It was contorting, its hull plates peeling away to reveal a pulsating, crystalline interior. It was turning itself inside out. Jin slammed the throttle to maximum, and the rust bucket's engines screamed in protest as they fought to break free. With a final violent wrench, the docking clamp shattered, and their ship was thrown clear, spinning wildly into the void. As Jin wrestled the rust bucket back under control, they watched the final death of the Odyssey. It didn't explode. It imploded, collapsing in on itself in a silent, breathtaking flash of violet light that seemed to absorb the very stars around it. Then, it was gone. All that remained was a shimmering, residual energy field and a profound, echoing silence. They were alive. They had the data. They had won. Kalen slumped in his chair, the adrenaline finally draining away, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. On the comm, Echo's voice flickered, weak but clear for the first time since they entered the static. "When the song is over," it whispered. "But I remember the words." Jin brought up the data cache on the main screen. It was vast, far more than just Omnicore research notes. There were star charts of unknown galaxies, biological data on a dozen extinct species, and the history of the entity. They were the architects, a race of crystalline beings who saw the chaotic nature of organic life as a disease to be cured through forced evolution, through ascension. The Odyssey hadn't been an Omnicore experiment that went wrong. Omnicore had been the architect's experiment. The corporation had been following instructions, a complex set of technological breadcrumbs left for an ambitious, greedy species to find, leading them to this exact spot, all to create a new, more resilient vessel for the architects to inhabit. But the most terrifying file was the last one. It was a single, repeating data packet, a beacon. It was broadcasting from the core they had just downloaded. It wasn't Omnicore research. It was a message. And as Jin translated the alien language, her face went white with a new, colder fear. "Kyle," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This data, it's not a prize. It's a map. A map leading from this system directly back to Earth." They hadn't stolen a secret. They had just become the delivery boys for an interstellar invasion. The silence on the bridge of the Rust Bucket was heavier than any gravity well. It was a dense, suffocating thing, packed with the weight of their discovery. Jin stared at the translated architect text glowing on the screen, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. A map to Earth. They hadn't pulled off the score of a lifetime. They had rung the dinner bell for a race of cosmic butchers. "We have to destroy it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She turned from the console, her eyes finding Kalen's. "Now, we eject the core and hit it with every weapon we have." "No," Kalen answered, his voice a low, hard rumble that cut through her panic. He was already moving, limping towards the medical locker. "We do that. We're blind. That core is the only thing that tells us what they are, what they want, and how they operate. It's the only weapon we have." "It's not a weapon. It's a contagion," she retorted, her voice rising. "Don't you get it? As long as we have it, we're leading them straight to our home." "Our home," Kalen scoffed, pulling a medical welder and a pack of dermal regenerators from the locker. Omnicore and the consortium turned their back on people like us a long time ago. But you're right about one thing. We can't let them get there. He tossed the supplies to her. "Patch up Vorlag. I'll see how badly our ship is bleeding." The argument was left hanging in the air, unresolved. Jin knew he was right, in a cold, practical way. Destroying the data meant destroying their only source of intelligence on an enemy that could rewrite the laws of physics. But keeping it felt like holding a live grenade with a faulty pin. She found Vorlog in the mess hall, sitting silently at a table as he methodically cleaned the crystal shards from his weapon. He had already sealed the gash in his shoulder with emergency synth skin. His pain tolerance something far beyond human. He simply watched as Jin worked, his gaze distant, as if he were looking at a battlefield only he could see. Kalen's damage report was grim. The fight to break free from the Odyssey had pushed the Rust Bucket's aging reactor to its breaking point. Power was fluctuating. The port thruster was barely responding, and their long-range comms were completely fried. They were adrift, wounded, and carrying the most dangerous object in the galaxy. It was Echo who broke the tense quiet. The AI's voice, now stripped of its usual chaotic whispers, was disturbingly lucid, though it spoke with a strange, formal syntax that was not its own. "Analysis of the primary data cache is complete," it announced from the bridge speakers. "The broadcast protocol is not passive. It is a quantum-entangled resonance key. It is not designed to be followed. It is designed to be received." Jin rushed back to the bridge, Kalen close behind. "What does that mean?" "Echo," she demanded. "The architects do not navigate space as you do." The AI explained, its voice a calm, chilling monotone. "They fold it. The data cache is the lock. The key is already at the destination. When the two resonate, a gateway is opened, a stable, instantaneous pathway." A cold dread settled in Kalen's stomach. "The key is on Earth." "Affirmative," Echo replied. "A dormant crystalline seed, delivered by unknown means, buried deep within the planet's mantle. Its presence was the reason your world was chosen for the experiment." This was worse than a map. They weren't just a breadcrumb trail, they were holding the trigger. Jin frantically scanned the data core's sub-frequencies, her face growing paler by the second. "There's something else," she stammered. "Another signal, much weaker, embedded in the core's hardware. It's an omnicore tracking beacon, a high-security one. They're not waiting for us to report in. They're coming for us." They were caught between two apocalypses. On one side, the architects, waiting for the key to turn. On the other, Omnicore, hunting them down to reclaim their apocalyptic prize. They were out of time, out of options, and running out of space to hide. "Where do we go?" Jin asked, the question hanging like a death sentence. Kalen looked at the star chart, at the swirling chaos of the static behind them, and the ordered, corporate-controlled systems ahead. Neither was safe. They needed a third option, a place off the map, a shadow where the light of corporate law didn't reach. "Harrow's Rift," he said, his voice grim. "It's a black market port carved into a rogue asteroid, a haven for smugglers, deserters, and information brokers. If anyone knows how to build a cage for a ghost, we'll find them there. And if Omnicore finds us first, then we give them a fight they won't forget." Kalen growled. He turned to the helm. "Echo, I need you to do something for me. That song you heard from the architect, the one you said you remembered. Can you replicate it?" There was a pause. The core consciousness of the Odyssey was a symphony of unified thought. My own matrix is fragmented, a choir of ghosts. I can replicate the resonance, but it would be a broken, discordant version. "Perfect," Kalen said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "Jin, plot a course for Harrow's Rift. A messy one. Through that asteroid field on the edge of the system. Vorlag, get to the aft turret. We're about to have company." As if on cue, a proximity alert shrieked. A single ship dropped out of FTL space behind them, sleek and black, shaped like a stiletto blade. It bore no corporate markings, but its design was unmistakable. It was an Omnicore Revenant-class pursuer, a ship built for one purpose, hunting down and retrieving corporate assets, human or otherwise. "It's faster than us, Kyle," Jin said, her hands flying across the controls, trying to coax more speed from their failing engines. "Far faster. We can't outrun it." "We're not going to outrun it," he replied calmly. "We're going to lose it." He nodded to the AI. "Echo, on my mark. Broadcast your broken song on all frequencies. Let's give them something to think about." The chase was a desperate, high-stakes gamble. The Revenant closed the distance with terrifying speed, its weapon ports glowing with intent. It didn't hail them. It didn't offer terms. It simply opened fire. Lances of crimson energy sliced through the void, forcing Jin into a series of gut-wrenching evasive maneuvers. The rust bucket groaned and shuddered. A wounded beast trying to shake off a predator. "They're not trying to destroy us." Vorlag's voice rumbled over the comm from the gunnery chair. "They are targeting our engines, our life support. They want the core intact. Just hold them off a little longer," Kalen urged, his eyes fixed on the dense asteroid field looming ahead. It was their only chance. A state-of-the-art hunter like the Revenant would have no trouble navigating the field. But the rust bucket had an advantage. It was unpredictable. Its damaged thruster made its movements erratic, almost random. "We're in range," Jin shouted. "Entering the field, now." The ship plunged into a storm of rock and ice. Asteroids the size of fighters tumbled past the viewport. Jin's piloting was a work of art, a frantic dance on the edge of annihilation. The Revenant followed, its movements precise and fluid, easily matching their every turn. "They're too good," Jin gritted out, a rogue piece of debris scraping along their hull with a deafening screech. "They're just waiting for us to make a mistake." "Then let's give them one," Kalen said. "Now." Echo. The AI complied. A wave of psychic noise erupted from the rust bucket, a chaotic, maddening broadcast of fractured consciousness. It was the architect's signal, twisted and corrupted by Echo's own shattered memories. It was the sound of a god having a seizure. On their screen, they saw the Revenant's energy shields flicker wildly. The precise, calculated pursuit faltered for just a second as its advanced systems tried to process the impossible data stream. That second was all they needed. Jin. Hard to port. Full reverse on the starboard thruster, Kalen commanded. The ship spun violently, a maneuver no sane pilot would attempt inside an asteroid field. They shot directly towards a massive, spinning chunk of rock. "Are you insane?" Jin screamed, but she followed the order. The Revenant, recovering from the psychic blast, moved to intercept, anticipating they would try to swing around the asteroid. But that wasn't Kalen's plan. Vorlag, fire on the asteroid. Now, a bolt of plasma from the aft turret slammed into the spinning rock. It didn't destroy it, but the impact was enough to fracture its surface, sending a massive cloud of smaller, faster debris directly into the Revenant's path. The hunter ship, caught completely by surprise, had no time to evade. It plowed directly into the shrapnel cloud. Alarms blared on their threat display as they watched the Revenant's shields collapse, its sleek hull pummeled by 1,000 tiny impacts. The rust bucket shot past the chaos, diving deep into the relative safety of the asteroid field's densest quarter. They had bought themselves time. Hours later, bruised and battered, they limped out of the other side of the field. Behind them, there was no sign of the Revenant. They hadn't destroyed it. A ship like that was too tough, but they had wounded it, forced it to stop for repairs. They had survived. Ahead of them, a single, massive asteroid loomed in the black. Its surface was a chaotic hive of blinking lights, docking bays, and jury-rigged structures, all clustered around a deep, central chasm. This was Harrow's Rift, the last free port in the sector. They had made it to the edge of the world, into a den of thieves and killers. As the rust bucket drifted towards the station's landing control, a new icon appeared on their sensor display. A single, unidentified ship, holding a stationary position just outside the Rift's declared neutral zone. It was waiting. They had shaken their pursuer, but they hadn't lost their shadow. They had found a sanctuary, but it was a sanctuary surrounded by hungry wolves, and they were carrying the only thing in the universe worth dying for. Harrow's Rift was less a station and more a wound in the fabric of space that had been cauterized with greed and desperation. The central chasm plunged into the asteroid's core, a vertical city bathed in the lurid glow of neon signs and the flicker of welding torches. Ships of every conceivable design were crammed into docking bays carved haphazardly into the rock walls, their hulls scarred with the marks of hard lives and narrow escapes. The air in the docking bay was thick with the smell of ozone, recycled oxygen, and something vaguely organic and unpleasant. The moment they stepped off the rust bucket, they were adrift in a sea of noise and motion. Goliath mercenaries, their faces hidden behind reflective helmets, patrolled the walkways. Information brokers with augmented eyes watched from shadowy alcoves, their gazes lingering on the newcomers. Deals were being made in hushed tones in a dozen different languages, for everything from illegal weapons to forged identities. This was a place where allegiances were as stable as the asteroid's gravity, which fluctuated with a nauseating rhythm. Keep your heads on a swivel and your hands on your weapons, Kalen muttered, his eyes scanning the crowds. Everyone here would sell their own mother for a tank of fuel. They'll smell that Omnicore beacon on us like blood in the water. Their goal was a man known only as Silas. He was a legend in the underworld, a former consortium cryptographer who had gone rogue, taking a wealth of state secrets with him. He was a ghost, a whisper, but it was said that for the right price, he could make anything or anyone disappear. If they wanted to build a cage for the architect's data core, Silas was their only hope. They found his office in the lowest, most dangerous level of the rift, a place the locals called the Sump. It was a small, cluttered workshop tucked behind a noodle bar that seemed to be serving something vaguely reptilian. The air was heavy with the scent of soldering flux and stale synthale. Silas himself was a small, wiry man with a cascade of silver data ports embedded in his scalp and eyes that were a pair of constantly shifting, holographic lenses. He didn't look up from the complex device he was tinkering with as they entered. "If you're here about the shipment of Rillian spice, I already told Jax's crew it was lost in a plasma fire," he said, his voice a dry, rasping sound. "A tragic, unforeseen accident." "We're not here for Jax," Kalen said, stepping forward. "We have a problem. A data problem. We were told you're the best at making things secure." Silas finally looked up, his holographic eyes zooming in on Kalen, then Jin, then Vorlag. He took in their battered gear, the tension in their stances. "The best is expensive, and I don't deal in corporate squabbles. Too messy." Jin stepped forward, placing a datapad on his workbench. "This isn't a squabble. It's an extinction-level event, and it's not corporate." "Not entirely." Silas's eyes flickered as he scanned the encrypted summary. Jin had prepared a heavily redacted version of their discovery that hinted at an external, non-human intelligence without revealing the whole terrifying truth. He was silent for a long time, his expression unreadable behind the shifting light of his lenses. "You're being hunted," he stated. "Not a question. One of Omnicore's revenants. I'd wager. From the energy signature, your ship is leaking. You're loud." "We handled it," Vorlag rumbled from the doorway, his massive frame blocking the only exit. "You delayed it," Silas corrected, a thin, humorless smile touching his lips. "Those ships are relentless. They're already sniffing around the rift's perimeter, and whatever is on that core you're carrying, it's broadcasting a faint, quantum-level whisper. I can feel it humming in my teeth." He leaned forward, the light from his eyes illuminating the tense lines on Kalen's face. "You haven't just brought a monster to my doorstep. You've brought its leash. So, the question is, what's in it for me to help you before Omnicore decides to sanitize this entire rock? Everything we have," Kalen said. "We'll sign over the rust bucket, every last credit we own." Silas chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Your ship is a flying coffin, and you're too hot to have any credits left. No, I want something more valuable. I want the truth. The full, unredacted data. All of it." Jin's breath hitched. Absolutely not. You have no idea what you're asking for. That knowledge is the key to my survival. Silas finished for her. I'm a pragmatist. I know that knowledge, especially the dangerous kind, is the only real currency in this galaxy. You want me to build you a Faraday cage for a god's thoughts? Fine. But I get a copy. That's my price. They were trapped. Giving him the data was an unimaginable risk. The knowledge of the architects, of the gateway to Earth, in the hands of a black market information broker was a catastrophe waiting to happen. But without his help, Omnicore would catch them, and the architect's plan would proceed anyway. It was a choice between two different flavors of doom. Kalen looked at Jin, a silent conversation passing between them. He saw the conflict in her eyes, the engineer's caution warring with the survivor's desperation. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. You get your copy, Kalen said, his voice tight. But the original stays with us, and you build the containment unit first. The work was a feverish, paranoid marathon. Silas, true to his reputation, was a genius. He and Jin worked side by side in his shielded workshop, a strange pair of disgraced visionaries. They didn't speak of ethics or consequences, only of quantum mechanics and esoteric code. They were building a containment field based on a theoretical design Silas had stolen from the consortium years ago, a stasis matrix that didn't just block signals, but actively folded the space-time within it, effectively isolating the core from the rest of the universe. While they worked, Kalen and Vorlog took on the impossible task of keeping them safe. The atmosphere in the rift had shifted. News traveled fast in a place like this. A battered ship, a rumored Omnicore bounty, a whisper of a high-value prize. It was enough to turn the station's predators against them. They were being watched, constantly. A Zeltron bounty hunter with chrome teeth tried to corner Kalen in a cantina. A pair of hulking Goliath mercenaries, old comrades of Vorlags from the wars, approached him with an offer to betray his crew for a cut of the prize. He responded by breaking one's jaw and dislocating the other's shoulder without saying a word. The pressure was building. A slow closing fist. They were running out of time. The Omnicore ship was still out there, waiting. Its patience a far greater threat than any hot-headed bounty hunter. Kalen knew it was only a matter of time before they made their move. Neutral zone be damned. The containment unit was finished on the third day. It was an ugly, brutalist thing. A sphere of interlocking plates and glowing conduits, about a meter in diameter. It hummed with a low, dissonant energy that made their hair stand on end. It's ready, Silas announced, wiping a sheen of sweat from his brow. Once the core is placed inside and the matrix is activated, it will be completely inert. No signal in, no signal out. It will, for all intents and purposes, cease to exist in this dimension. He then held out a data chip. My payment. Jin hesitated, her hand trembling slightly as she held the chip containing the architect data. This was the moment of betrayal, the point of no return. Silas took it, his holographic eyes glowing with a covetous light as he slotted it into a port on his temple. His body went rigid, his eyes flickering wildly as the raw, alien knowledge flooded his mind. At that exact moment, the world exploded. A concussive blast rocked the entire workshop, sending tools and components flying. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the screaming red of emergency strobes. The noodle bar outside was a wall of flame. "They're here," Kalen yelled, grabbing his pulse rifle. "They've breached the station, Through the smoke and chaos, figures in sleek, black combat armor advanced, their movements fluid and silent. Omnicore death squads. They weren't station security, they were corporate assassins, here to clean up a mess. Silas staggered back, clutching his head, a thin trickle of blood running from his nose. Too much, he gasped, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. It's beautiful. They're not just builders, they're artists. Snap out of it, Colin roared, firing a burst that forced two of the soldiers to take cover. Jin, get the core into the Matrix Vorlag. With me. The workshop became a kill zone. Plasma bolts seared the air. Vorlag was a whirlwind of destruction, using a heavy workbench as a shield and a weapon. His raw strength a brutal counter to the soldiers' tactical precision. But they were outnumbered, outgunned. One of the soldiers flanked them, raising a high-powered disruptor rifle, aiming it squarely at Jin as she struggled to secure the architect core inside the containment sphere. Before the soldier could fire, Silas moved. With a guttural scream, he lunged forward, his eyes glowing with an almost divine madness. The knowledge of the architects had done more than just inform him. It had changed him. He raised his hand, and the soldier's rifle twisted in his grip, its metal components warping and melting as if under immense heat. A second soldier turned on him, but Silas just smiled, and the soldier's helmet cracked, the plasteel visor shattering as an unseen force crushed it. He was wielding the architect's power, bending physics to his will, but his body couldn't handle it. Veins stood out on his temples, his skin grew pale, and the blood from his nose was now a torrent. "Go!" he screamed at them, his voice a distorted chorus of his own and something ancient and alien. It's not enough to cage it. You have to show them. Show them the chaos they despise. He turned to face the advancing soldiers, a terrifying, ecstatic grin on his face. "Let me show you a true work of art. Here." A wave of pure force erupted from him, blowing the remaining soldiers back and bringing the ceiling down. Kalen grabbed Jin, who had just managed to slam the containment sphere shut and hit the activation sequence. "We have to go." Now they fled through the collapsing workshop, Vorlag clearing a path, leaving Silas to his glorious, insane last stand. They sprinted through the war zone that the sump had become, dodging blaster fire from Omnicore troops and station gangs who had joined the fray, hoping for a piece of the action. They made it back to the rust bucket by the skin of their teeth, the containment sphere clutched between them. As Jin fired up the engines, Kalen looked back at the chaos engulfing Harrow's rift. He had made a deal with a devil, and that devil had, in the end, bought them their escape. But Silas's last words echoed in his mind. "It's not enough to cage it. You have to show them." He looked at the inert, silent sphere now secured in the center of their cargo bay. They had their cage. They were, for the moment, safe from the architects and hidden from Omnicore. But they were still just running. Caging the monster wasn't enough. Sooner or later, someone would find a way to open it. Silas, in his final, enlightened moments, had understood. The only way to win wasn't to hide the weapon, but to choose the battlefield and fire it themselves. The escape from Harrow's rift was not a clean one. It was a desperate, burning retreat from a station that was consuming itself in a firestorm of corporate warfare and gang violence. The rust bucket clawed its way into the void, its hull patched with fresh scorch marks, its crew a collection of raw, exposed nerves. In the cargo hold, the containment sphere sat in an eerie, absolute silence. a stark contrast to the chaos it had wrought. It was a black hole in the heart of their ship, a cage holding the end of the world. For days, they drifted in the silent dark of unpatrolled space, making patchwork repairs and letting the echoes of the battle fade. The mood on the bridge was somber, heavy with the ghost of Silas and the weight of his final cryptic command. They had the cage, but they were still the prey, and the silence of the void felt less like safety and more like the held breath of a predator. It was Kalen who finally broke the spell. He stood before the main viewport, staring out at the indifferent stars, his reflection a tired, scarred man in the plasteel. He was right, he said, his voice quiet but carrying the force of a final decision. Silas, he was right. Caging it isn't enough. Jin looked up from the diagnostic panel, her face etched with exhaustion. What else is there? Kyle. We run. We find the darkest corner of the galaxy, and we bury this thing so deep no one ever finds it. That's the only move we have left. No, he countered, turning to face her. That's just passing the problem on. Sooner or later, someone finds it. Omnicore, or someone worse. The architects are still out there. They know the key is missing, but they won't stop looking. Running is just a slower way to die. He leaned on the console, his gaze intense. Silas said to show them the chaos they despise. The architects, Omnicore, they're the same. They crave order, control, predictability. Their systems are rigid, centralized. That's their strength, and it's their weakness. A slow, dawning horror and understanding spread across Jin's face. You want to use it, not the core. He clarified. The idea of the core. Echo, the fragmented AI, which had been running silent diagnostics, chimed in, its voice now a stable, haunting fusion of its old self and the ghost of the architect's consciousness. My matrix is an anomaly, a paradox of structured data and organic memory decay. I am the chaos you speak of. The plan was insane, a final, desperate throw of the dice born from the ashes of Harrow's rift. It was a suicide mission, and every one of them knew it. They would not run. They would turn and face the beast, but not on their own terms. They would fight on the enemy's terms, in the one place they were strongest and most vulnerable, their own network. They would take the fight to Omnicore Prime. Omnicore Prime was the glittering jewel in the corporation's crown, a massive, wheel-shaped space station orbiting a blue giant star in the heart of the corporate sector. It was the brain of the entire Omnicore empire, a hub of commerce, research, and military command. It was also the most heavily defended point in known space. Attacking it with a single battered salvage ship was not just suicidal, it was absurd. But they weren't going to attack it with weapons. Jin, her initial horror giving way to a grim, focused brilliance, began to work. She and Echo became one, a single mind dedicated to a singular, impossible task. They couldn't open the containment sphere, but Echo didn't need to. It remembered the song. It remembered the fundamental resonance of the architect's consciousness. Jin's job was to turn their ship's battered comms array into a focused broadcast cannon, a rifle that didn't fire bullets, but weaponized insanity. They would amplify Echo's broken as chaotic version of the architect signal and inject it directly into Omnicore Prime's central data spine. They would give the orderly, sterile corporate network a soul, and then drive it mad While they worked, Vorlag prepared for a different kind of war. He stripped the ship of every non-essential component, using the scrap metal to reinforce the hull around the bridge and engine room. He rerouted power from life support and gravity plating to the weapon systems and shields. He turned the rust bucket from a dying freighter into a guided missile, a battering ram designed for a single, final charge. He worked in silence, his movements economical and precise. He was a weapon preparing himself for his ultimate purpose, and in his eyes, there was a quiet, profound peace. The journey to the core systems was a ghost run. They flew dark, their transponder off, navigating through treacherous nebula and forgotten smugglers' routes. They were a phantom, slipping through the cracks of the galaxy. Their purpose, a terrible secret held between the three of them. There were no grand speeches, no last-minute confessions. Their goodbyes were in the shared glances over a console, the quiet nod in a corridor, the shared burden of what was to come. When they arrived, the sight of Omnicore Prime was breathtaking and terrifying. It hung against the brilliant blue of its star like a deity's halo, a monument to the power and order they were about to shatter. A cordon of sleek, white cruisers patrolled its perimeter, and at their head, like a loyal hound, was the Revenant. It had been repaired, rearmed, and it was waiting for them. "They knew we'd come," Jin whispered, her hands poised over the broadcast controls. "It doesn't matter," Kalen said, strapping himself into the pilot's chair. "They're expecting a ship. We're a message." He keyed the comm. "Vorlag, you ready?" "Born ready." The Goliath's voice came back, calm and steady from the gunnery station. Kalen took a deep breath and pushed the throttle forward. The rust bucket, stripped and scarred, surged towards the most fortified installation in the galaxy. The reaction was immediate. Alarms blared across the Omnicore comm channels they were monitoring. The fleet moved to intercept. The Revenant led the charge, a black spear aimed at their heart. "Shields up, weapons hot," Kalen yelled, his knuckles white on the controls. "Jin, how close do we need to be?" "Touching distance. Almost," she replied, her eyes locked on the fluctuating energy readings. "The station's primary data hub is shielded against remote attacks. We have to bypass the outer layers physically. I need to get the signal inside the station's own comms field." The battle was short, brutal, and utterly one-sided. The rust bucket was a bar brawler in a fencing tournament. It took hits, its ancient shields flaring and dying under the focused fire of the corporate fleet. Vorlag was a demon in the gunnery chair, his shots wild but purposeful, not aiming to kill, but to disrupt, to create openings, to force the enemy ships to break formation. The Revenant ignored the chaos, its purpose singular. It closed in, its disruptor cannons tearing through their engine block. The rust bucket shuddered violently, its engines screaming their death agony. They were losing power, losing altitude, spiraling down towards the station's gleaming white surface. "We're not going to make it," Jin shouted over the sound of exploding consoles. "We just need to be close enough," Kalen roared back, fighting the controls, his one good leg braced against the deck. He wasn't trying to fly anymore. He was aiming. He pointed the nose of his dying ship at the central spire of Omnicore Prime, the location of the primary data hub. A final, devastating volley from the Revenant ripped through the bridge. The forward viewport spiderwebbed with cracks. Vorlag's station went silent. "Vorlag!" Kylan screamed. There was no answer. Through the fractured viewport, Kalen could see the central spire growing closer, a tower of white and silver. They were going to hit it. Jin, now, he bellowed, his voice raw. Do it now. Jin slammed her hand down on the activation panel. In the cargo bay, the containment sphere remained silent, but from the ship's comms array, a silent scream erupted. A wave of pure weaponized chaos. The fragmented soul of a dead AI mixed with the logic of an alien god shot out from the dying rust bucket and washed over Omnicore Prime. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the lights on the station, a billion points of orderly, corporate white, began to flicker. They changed color, shifting from white to the menacing, beautiful violet of the architects. The sleek cruisers of the defense fleet suddenly went dead in the water, their systems crashing. The Revenant, its connection to the central command severed, began to fire wildly, its targeting systems corrupted, blasting one of its own sister ships. On the bridge of the rust bucket, Kalen watched through the dying light, a grim smile on his bloody face. He had delivered the message. Echo, Jin whispered, as the ship around them tore itself apart. Get the core. Eject. Aft cargo. She had prepped the smallest emergency escape pod. Not for a person, but for the containment sphere. Affirmative. The AI's voice said, calm amidst the destruction. Goodbye, Jin. The last thing Kalen saw was the spire of Omnicore Prime, now covered in the glowing, crystalline patterns of the architects. A beautiful, terrible cancer growing in the heart of the machine. He had shown them chaos, and it was art. The rust bucket struck the tower not with a bang, but with a final, silent flash of light, consumed by the very chaos it had unleashed. Far below, a single, tiny escape pod, cloaked by the debris in the energy storm, shot away from the dying station. Inside, the containment sphere sat inert. The pod, guided by the last vestiges of a broken AI's will, set a course for the blue giant star at the center of the system. Its final command was simple: navigate to the point of no return and then cease all function. Months later, on a backwater moon in the Outer Rim, a woman with tired eyes and a new name watched the Galactic news feeds. The official story was that an Omnicore Prime had suffered a catastrophic reactor failure due to a terrorist attack by anti-corporate extremists. The corporation was in chaos, its stock worthless, its centralized network shattered beyond repair. The galaxy was in turmoil, but it was a different kind of turmoil. The rigid, oppressive order was broken. There was fear, uncertainty, but there was also a sliver of something that hadn't existed before a chance. The woman. Jin finished her drink and walked out into the alien night. She was the only one left who knew the truth. She was the keeper of a secret that had cost her everything and everyone she loved. She carried no weapon, no ship, no crew. All she carried was the memory of the song and the knowledge that true monsters weren't just the ones who came from the stars, but also the ones who would sacrifice anything, even their own souls, for the sake of control. She was free and utterly, completely alone.